Chair, you are now live.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 9:03 on March 25th, 2022. I'll take roll call. I'll go through the roll call. And when you hear your name, just say hello, please. Vice Chairman David Brown.
Hello.
Let's see. Kate and Kaya.
Hello.
Joe Ransmeyer.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ann Keller.
Hi there.
Hello. Tim Schaller.
Hello.
And Samantha Cole.
Hello.
And I'm Darren Green. I'm the chair. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 25th, 2022 Asheville Area River Redevelopment Commission meeting. The purpose of the AARRC is to recommend to the city and county an overall policy for the continued development and sustainability of the regional riverfront. The commission provides recommendations to the city and county for effective management of the public resources for the districts and actively pursues and assists private sector investments in the districts. The commission is made up of 14 members representing the city of Asheville, the Council of Independent Business Owners, Riverlink, Asheville City Council, Buncombe County Commission, and the town of Woodfin. Our committees consist of transportation and mobility and public safety, including water quality. All commission members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through the committee meetings a bit differently. Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 166A-19.24F, this will be a remote meeting which the public can access by any of the following means. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the committee page. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by calling 855-925-2801. The meeting code number is 4602 for callers to call in and listen and make comments. If you'd like to send comments by email you can send them to Riverfront Commission March 25 at publicinput.com. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. Commissioners, please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. When you have a question or would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Please remember to mute your phone after you are done speaking. All right, we can start this agenda. I would like to start off by just acknowledging and thanking all the hard work that was put into yesterday's live retreat. And a big shout out and thanks to Steph Dahl for all of her hard work and professionalism. And I, for one, really enjoyed and appreciated having most of the commission members there and touring through the district and meeting new business owners and then the last part of the day, the 3:30 to 5 policy on tap sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce was really helpful and beneficial. And Steph, you really shined in that and on that panel. And I'm very proud to have you as a part of our River Commission. So thank you.
I second that emotion.
Okay. I just want to say thanks to all of you for the thank you note. I'm very appreciative of that and all that you do for our city and for my professional work. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask if there has been any public comment.
Chair, we have not received any public comment and there's no one in the queue at the current time.
Okay. Well, we'll move into our next agenda item, which is the sharing out of three things that we're hoping, two to three things that really stood out individually for each of the commission members that were on the tour yesterday. Is there would somebody like to begin this?
I can
Chairman
jump.
Brown, would you like to, oh, Tim?
Yeah, I can jump in. First, thanks, Ann, for your presentation, and that's my first takeaway. As staff and other people know that I've been commenting at least about the condition of the river for a number of years. And while it's talking to Derek later in the evening, I know it's going to be hard for people who business depends on the river to have to acknowledge the condition it's in. And at the same time, I do think that if we had any other resource that was, if the Biltmore Estate was collapsing and dangerous, we'd probably fix it. So I think it's great to get the news out there and get in that direction. My second takeaway was I enjoyed hearing Jay a couple of times yesterday from Black Wall Street through BizWorks and a couple of other things. We've partnered with him, and I've always had phone conversations, not really talked to him. So to see his professionalism and see what he's going to do to lead that was good for me. And the third was just acknowledging what's going down Amboy Road and that their own little section. I do have questions about the last place we went, and hearing the numbers that what it's going to cost them to run that place. It'll be interesting to watch. That's what I got.
Darren, I had a few thoughts. One of them is similar to what Tim just said about the Amboy Road area becoming the next RAD or whatever we want to call it, outdoor activity center area. I think that's something we all need to pay attention to and be thoughtful about. The second one is, I think more than I had started to think ahead of time, I feel like it would be helpful to think about perhaps pushing for this Riverfront Commission to be a little bit different than it might be. Maybe what are new goals or priorities? What can we get approved, even though we're in the middle potentially of the city redoing all these commissions? It seems to me that with what we've seen about water and development and working lands, that we should really be looking at expanding the scope of this Riverfront Commission and maybe not call it redevelopment, but maybe try to go all the way to Black Mountain and really try to get some other discussions going about how we're going to keep our river from being loved to death, because that's where we're headed and everybody will suffer from that. And the last thing was, I feel like it's part of our duty as well to talk more with the city about stormwater and what we can do to help the development down there. Kate and I talked a little bit to Brian Schick about the lofts or whatever they're called now, and how we have an opportunity there to maybe upgrade the stormwater treatment rather than just putting a big pipe to make it go faster through that area. What could we do, and how can we discuss that with the city, Public Works and City Council and whoever else to try to get that? It's an opportunity. They're already going to be tearing the road up and doing things. Why wouldn't we take a chance to get that to help us in the future? Those were my three takeaways.
Darren, if I may, just going to reiterate what Tim had said about Ann's presentation. I thought it was excellent, and it certainly points out the fact that the water quality is going to be, it's a problem now, it's going to continue to be in the future. Some kind of long-term funding needs to be addressed. I was impressed by the entrepreneurial spirit and of the young people that are these businesses down there. For them to put their money and their time and effort into making the river area a outdoor spot where families and people from out of town can come and enjoy themselves in our community. I really want to say a heads up to them. And the other thing is there's going to be so much growth and expansion. I just don't want us to lose the sight of the challenges that we've got with the homelessness, the cleanliness, the safety, parking, traffic situations. We're going to have to stay on top of that for a period of time.
Thank you, David. Who'd like to go next?
Well, I can go next. I'll just read off some notes that I put in last night. I want to say, number one, we are fortunate to have here in Asheville such passionate, dedicated, and resourceful city staff whose caring and hard work have brought many players and stakeholders together and helped to facilitate solutions and evolving understanding of the developing riverfront, with the challenges as well as opportunities that entails. And also, successful projects take a bold vision. This is sort of echoing on what David was saying, creativity and willingness to invest time and money to achieve the desired results. And number three takeaway was that the river, here I meant the French Broad and the Swannanoa, are a formidable presence, beautiful and constantly moving and changing, but always with the potential to rise and show the terrible force of water to move and rearrange and cover with mud the landscape and our human-built roads and structures.
Thanks, Joe. Samantha, I saw you put your hand up.
I sure did. Thank you. I just want to echo, first of all, everything that folks have already said in terms of thanking staff for the very, very intentional and purposeful work that they do every day to help ensure that the growth that our community is experiencing is something that happens as sustainably as possible. And I do mean sustainably in every sense of the word. It was incredibly important for me personally to hear the story of Black Wall Street in Asheville through Jay Hackett's eyes yesterday. And I really appreciate that kind of being at the forefront of the retreat yesterday. I really appreciate that that was part of the agenda and that that was something we could all learn from. And also, I just want to echo a little note that you made yesterday, Steph, during Policy on Tap, which is whenever we were talking about ways to ensure that art and artists can remain at the forefront of, you know, the River Arts District, of course, but also doing what we can do to make sure that there is more housing and that there is more infrastructure available in this district and, of course, around our community to meet a need that is quite outstanding. So whatever we can be doing as a board, as colleagues, I guess, in the future to make sure that we're able to find that balance to the extent possible is something that I really left Policy on Tap with on my mind yesterday.
Thanks, Samantha. And then I think Kate or Christy, would you like to, one of you?
I can jump in. First of all, the day was great. It was like a mental health day for me because I haven't been out like that since, I don't know, like 2.5 years. So thank you all for being so such fun to be with. So my 3 takeaways, I guess my first one is no one really talked about the river. I mean, we talked about what was happening on the edges and the sides, but not really what that means for the river. Anne's presentation, I love that. And even though it was short, the fact that you were able to quantify the value of the river, I thought was really, really important and something that everyone can understand and make sense. So I see, like, with that information, I still see the development just kind of using the river, not doing a whole lot to contribute to its health. And I think that will work for some time because, you know, nature takes its time, but at some point it's going to end up like the story of the giving tree. And even on the panel last night, with the exception of Steph, I don't think anyone talked about sustainability or stormwater for new buildings or development. And I really don't think that any of these folks would be doing what they're doing or be as excited about what they're doing if their river wasn't there. And I also want to be clear that I don't think that development and environmental resilience are like mutually exclusive. I think that we can do both. And there's so many great models out there. I guess that's my big takeaway. And then the other takeaway I think is more like emotional, is that, you know, reflecting on the day last night and being at the Policy on Tap event, what happens in Asheville it can't be binary. It just can't be development and economics and the developers on the panel. And it can't just remain the same, meaning the RAD area, as some people in the audience like so desperately want. And I think that the tension that I felt and that was in the room actually is a whole lot of progress. I think that that's a signal of sustainable development and progress when things do get hard and we're trying to balance really tough positions and what on the, I guess, at first glance seem like really impossible positions that can't go together. I think that we actually do have a path forward because those people were all in the room together. And I guess related to that is just that so many people, you all, the city staff, community really care. And so even when we disagree, I think that passion is actually a tremendous asset and capital for Asheville. And so what we decide to do with that and how we navigate that, it will be really important.
Thanks, Kate. And Christy?
Good morning, everybody. I definitely learned a lot from Ann yesterday, and that was probably number one. Number two was all of the new stuff happening on Amboy Road. I'm pleasantly surprised and think that's going to be a great spot. And then the Karen Craig Nolan Park, very excited about that. I think that that's going to be a huge asset to that area and to all of us and the whole community in the end. I had no idea how huge it was going to be, but I think it's a great thing and it's very exciting for all the stuff that we're working on. And then the crime and all the other stuff, that's kind of a side issue that hopefully we'll tackle as time goes on, but progress always. And thank you everybody for your help.
Thanks, Christy. And I'll go. It's hard to go after all you very smart folks, so I'll do my best here. But some of my takeaways were I really enjoyed meeting Jay. It was funny, Tim mentioned I had never met him before in person, so actually meeting him in person and sitting in that small room, listening to him was really, really enlightening and inspiring. And something that we have talked about a little bit over the years is the diversity within our own commission and the lack of it, I should say, and the outreach to the BIPOC community, especially. Part of our name is the Redevelopment Commission, and I feel like that community could really use some support in helping to redevelop an area that was once thriving with Black-owned businesses. So I would like to see the commission take some bold steps in helping that community redevelop that area in a sustainable way that can have some generational positive movement. So that was one takeaway. Of course, I loved Ann's. This is not one of my takeaways, but I'll just throw it in there. I loved Ann's presentation. I'm sorry I forced you to scarf down your salad, but you...
Was it the pointer that you loved or?
All of it. It was all great.
I'm teasing you. Thank you. Y'all are very sweet. Thank you.
But the way you were able to share that pretty complex information in 20 minutes was really powerful. And I thought maybe we could have you do it again on camera, because I think it's something that we could share. But to that point, I think touring the future KC Park was really impactful. I had not been on that piece of land ever. It's been fenced in as long as I can remember. And without having anything done to it, was just a really beautiful pastoral piece of real estate, piece of land. And I'm so glad it's in your hands and that that's not going to be developed into something that we might have to debate over. It's going to be a beautiful park. And I think it's really wonderful. And I think we can all agree that the development of parks in Asheville, in New York City, and in every city across our country spurs economic development and growth and activity. And it's exciting to see that happen and have there be some sort of a realistic timeline on that. And the third thing that was a takeaway that I had, it was from the Policy on Tap, the panel. And I guess my concern is that the projects like the Radical, a project that is going way out of their way to be, in my opinion, to be cool and to fit in, I worry that sometimes those really kitschy design forward projects might completely miss the mark and stain the actual authentic, beautiful, organic art that's happening within the district. So I'm sorry that's kind of a negative, but that is a concern, and something that I picked up on is that, you know, a project like that hires a New York designer to come in and put their spin on what they think that project would need to fit in or to be impactful in our district. And I think the beauty of the art that's being produced and the creativity that's being produced in the district so far that I can see has been very organic, and it's been people collaborating with one another and learning from one another by trial and error. And so that type of over-the-top development concerns me. So that was my final point there. So I do appreciate, again, everybody's insight, and I think these notes are going to be really helpful and allowing us as a commission to come together and create some strategic priorities for this upcoming year. So, Steph, I'm wondering, in the effort of time, I know that we missed an icebreaker. Maybe we should do the icebreaker with the whole commission. But the icebreaker was to tell everybody about a positive experience you individually have had with a body of water outside of the French Broad. So that might be something that we want to save. So I'll table that for now. But I thought it was a great idea, Steph. Do we want to move into the either the potential boards and commission restructure or the project planning? I don't know that we need to go into the commission background at this meeting, Steph. You have thoughts there, or David?
Waiting for David's thoughts.
Oh.
I'm waiting to turn on my microphone. I missed the first part of the meetings yesterday, and I thought on the agenda that was going to be discussed some at that point. So was there any discussion yesterday before lunch about the change in the commission?
No.
No, we hadn't talked about it at all.
Okay. Well, in our executive little meeting, why I told you all the time, it's very complex, and it's going to make some changes, but it's up to city council. I'm all for having a review of people's thoughts or whatever you want to talk about on that subject. It's kind of up to Steph as far as you feel comfortable at this time of the way it's progressing.
So I'll just say a few notes, and then maybe we will get into project planning, since there are at least two people in this meeting that have to leave early. So we have a small group today, and Darren, I appreciate what you said about making sure that all the commission members are here for certain conversations. So just for the record, since the meeting is being recorded, I just wanted to note for attendance purposes that today County Commissioner Parker Sloan is not attending. City Councilwoman Sage Turner is not attending. Mr. Ben Williamson could not attend. Mr. Jeremy Goldstein could not attend, and Jim McAllister is not attending. And that's, again, just for minute purposes and what have you. I will say that instead of going through a presentation I was going to have with you all, that what I was going to do during this session and what we can do together as a commission perhaps next month is go over a little bit of the history of the Riverfront Commission. The commission did start meeting in May of 2010, but the commission was formed after more than 1 year period where there was a study group made up of various stakeholders from around the region, convened by the city, talking about what we should do next for the river. And so that history of the study group and the formation of the commission really will help us understand the purpose and the why behind your current structure. And to Anne's point, her takeaway when she said, I really think we should kind of reconsider the scope, and I think she means the geographic scope and what we focus on. That conversation, let's pull that takeaway into the conversation about the commission. We'll have an understanding of the history and see if we lost some of that history, because we may actually already have some of that geographic purview, or if there needs to be something better outlined, or if there's outreach that needs to happen. This morning I was looking at the minutes from the very first AARRC meeting, and one of the comments made by one of the attendees was, hey, yes, let's go out and reach out to Black Mountain and some other folks. And within 1 year, the commission changed its name. So if you don't know this, all it did is go to City Council and ask that the Asheville Area Riverfront Redevelopment Commission. And that was just one change that was really important to the people at the very beginning. So we'll go through more of that type of stuff. And also a little bit, I want to make sure everybody knows how to get onto Muni Code and find your ordinance and really be able to pick through it and see what this charter says about your group. And then the third thing is, in lieu of going through some of this board and commission proposal restructure right now, I'll send the entire commission some links and ask that people look at a couple things in advance of our next meeting so that we can have an efficient discussion about it. So does that sound okay? We'll do all of those things at our next meeting based on Darren's input and David's support. I think so. And what we could do, if Darren was headed this way, he's looking to move on to talking about you all's kind of current focus area, the thing that's rising to the top, which is coming out of the Public Safety and Water Quality Committee. Yes, Darren?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say for the past probably 6 weeks or so, Steph, Joe, and Ann and I have met virtually to discuss what we're calling a kind of a running name, a water quality summit. And I've got some notes from of our meetings, but the goal of this summit is to share info to the public about, what organizations are doing, and to share the information that was just released from the 303D, the impaired waters list that Ann brought up in her presentation yesterday. We have started to name some of the partners that we would like to see. What this panel discussion could look like. Would there be a keynote speaker? Who might that keynote speaker be? Having somebody from the EPA discuss the actual 303D impaired waters list and what does that mean? get into some of the causes and treatments of the impaired waters. And that would be the part one of this summit. So we're thinking maybe that might be about an hour and a half. A part two would be talking about the action steps. At that point, we would identify the partners that we'd like to connect with. We'd also try and identify funding and grant opportunities to, clean the water up. And I'm going to throw this to Ann in a second. And then the part three would be an optional outdoor meet and greet along the riverfront to actually go and discuss some of these things in person. Maybe visit some of the different tributaries that run into the French Broad. So Ann and Joe, I'm happy to throw it to you for a little bit more digging in, but that's been the overview of what we've discussed.
Yeah, I think that covers it pretty well. I don't remember specifically saying an EPA water quality person, but somebody.
Landon?
Hmm?
Landon?
Oh, that's DEQ.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's the state, as opposed to getting somebody to come from Atlanta, which I could try to do, but it might be easier and better to have Landon, who knows the area and has been working here and certainly has more relationship with all of us. So he might be good. But yeah, I think that would be really good. Identifying the problem, how we got here, what the sources are, like I did yesterday, but a little more in detail perhaps, and some ideas, what people are doing already. Some of the nonprofits. I think Renee Fortner from Riverlink could really do a great presentation on the Southside Project and what she's doing with a bunch of partners. I think I may have mentioned that passing quickly yesterday. To improve water quality in the river, but also the quality of life in the public housing area that's just upslope from the river. I think it's a great project. There are other people like Greenworks and Mountain True and others that we might bring in depending on our time and interest. I think it also might be very interesting, even though it might be difficult. Tim Fox and I from DEQ, we're talking, and have been trying to talk to the Soil and Water Conservation District people about, how can we engage with the agricultural community to get them interested in the issue. And it's a challenge in many ways because of the complexity of their lives and their work and the limited, as I said yesterday, limited area they have to farm. But that's another idea. And weaving in the economic impact study, I think, would be a benefit, because then you tie the value of the river in economics, which some people understand and appreciate more than they might the environmental or personal. And so then you put the two together and people then have a feeling of whichever area you might be interested in, you have a knowledge of what the status of the river is now, what it means to all of us, and what we can do about it. So I think I think that would really be a great program, Darren. Thanks.
And sorry, Joe, 1 second, just to let everybody know, we have not come up with an actual date for this summit. So that, I think right now we're thinking, Steph, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe sometime in the fall.
Great. I agree. It's a good thing to plan towards. And Riverlink having just completed the Central Asheville watershed plan and having some real suggestions for things to implement to improve our stormwater in the riverfront area. I think bringing Renee in to give us a little more depth on that would be a great idea. It's we had to partner with people to get grants to have that study done. And I know the Pigeon River Fund was helpful to us, Ann. I don't know who else specifically, but that's something that's we've already got things to look at, but that's only a starting place for the whole watershed. But we might as well, I think it would excite people to know more about some of those plans and that does directly impact some of the project areas. And so that's a starting place anyway.
Tim's got his
Tim.
hand raised.
So it's a stretch, but Michael Regan, has been in the cloud room, has been in the French Broad. He's already, he's the EPA director for the federal government. He's in North Carolina. It may be worth a shot just to see if he's ever going to be in the area.
I'm adding his name to the list here of potential partners.
Well, I don't know if all of you know this, but Ann used to work for the EPA herself. So.
She was very good at it, I can tell you. That's how I met her.
So I'm going to echo something that Steph said yesterday in her, I won't get it right, but in your panel discussion. But the gist was kind of reigniting the community to recognize that, there are things that we should be talking about. And this is certainly one of the issues that we need to be discussing in the community in an effort to get our city council and county to respond to this issue. It is likely going to take community involvement, and likely it will take the community getting educated and loud, and make it a priority to our elected officials to actually devote the time and resources to this issue. And it's not like this issue is going to correct itself. This is not one of these things that's just going to happen on its own, that it's going to take the community, the nonprofits, the city council, the county commission to actually make it a priority. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to market this. And I think that's another component of this that we have to discuss about as a commission, is how to best market this summit to the public so that they feel engaged and they feel a responsibility to learn and get involved. So that'll be something too that we all as a commission have to use our networking abilities to reach out and get it on Blue Ridge Radio, and have somebody from WLOS maybe talk about it in a news story. And we're going to have to use all of our networking to push this out there.
Darren, we haven't, I don't think, discussed too much about this, but I'm wondering if, depending on the unsureness of COVID, would we want to do this, in public, in a venue where people could participate and listen and engage? I mean, there's some attractiveness for me to that. I'm just making up a location somewhere in New Belgium or somewhere we can be outdoors, but it's interesting and people can listen, and maybe there are other places as well, but that's right on the river. So it popped into my brain. I don't know what others are thinking. It just seems like if we could work towards that and have a fallback, it's always a fallback. It's always easy to be online, but if we could have a plan to do it live in person, that I think would have more impact than doing it virtually.
I could not agree more. We had David, Steph, and I had talked about some possible venues. They were all indoor venues. Some of them costing money. Some of them could be done without any, without any money. But I love the idea of hosting it outdoors. New Belgium might be a perfect spot to do it right there on the river. They're developing, or they're building, if they've not already completed, their covered patio, which would cover that contingency if it were raining. But they've always been a very willing partner, and I think that could be a really great venue to shoot for.
I know that they have also, I think, Tim, I'm getting feedback. I see your mic must be open.
Oh,
The indoor, the liquid center, no, the brew house has multimedia, and we've used that in the past for a couple of meetings on different things. That's one thing that, in fact, the French Red River Partnership is talking about having our annual meeting there in the morning, sometime in the fall. And then because they use it in the afternoon for tours, and then going outside to their new expanded or their covered area, whatever it is. And, likely that isn't, because if we did it during, I don't know what you were thinking, but if we did it during a late morning, then we wouldn't even have to worry about food because people could eat food truck food right out there. And so everybody benefits that way. I'm just throwing that out. It's a mixture. You could have an indoor and an out or whatever, just options.
Yeah, I like all those ideas.
I guess my thought is, how do we draw people to it? How do we make it something that people want to, take time out of their busy schedules to participate in? There's going to have to be some, lead up to it or some kind of, I don't know, something to attract people to wanting to participate in.
Joe, part of the conversation I remember us having, I thought it was going to be more like May than fall. And then we were thinking that would be tied well to the publication of the impaired waters list, which will happen in May, and this recent economic impact study. So we were at that moment, we were, in my mind, that was perfect timing. The media is starting to pay attention. The two things go together. Maybe there's some op-eds that we write or something, and then people have an interest in attending and contributing to the conversation. So I don't know exactly how that works months later. You do have to do a lot more work than to stir up the interest in the fall.
We had also talked about pulling in the outdoor outfitters into this conversation, and Kyle, in fact, had, from the stand-up paddleboard people, had offered to participate in our groups, so at least our planning groups.
Just one more comment, Joe, because you just reminded me of something. The economic impact study is going to be presented at the Outdoor Economy Conference on April 6th. So that would have, again, been another lead into a May gathering, because we could have harnessed that energy. But yeah, you're right. We didn't talk about that. And we did talk about the outfitters, Darren. We need to put them back on the list.
Well,
Yeah, I think we pushed it out a little bit because we didn't think we would be able to put it together by May. But, if we can do it by May, then I support that. If you think there's enough time there.
We'd have to get going on it. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know what that means for Steph in terms of organizing this stuff. I think it's a doable thing myself, because that's real. If we did it towards late May before Memorial Day, we'd have almost 2 months. So I don't know, maybe Steph thinks it's a crazy time frame.
I'll provide some comments from like a staff perspective or city perspective. Is that all right? So, okay. The first thing is just a reminder that Councilwoman Turner and Commissioner Parker Sloan are not here. Parker Sloan is a part of your subcommittee, but what I think would make a lot of sense, especially with this board and commission restructure conversation happening, which part of the impetus for that is to really get clear about what boards and commissions need to be doing and how there's a connection to city council priorities. Let me reframe this. I think you need to talk to Sage and Parker and get an understanding of how much support there is from the city and county for this to be a city and county sponsored activity versus more of a partnership or civic engagement that you all are going to do with a lot of other stakeholders, Mountain True and Riverlink. That is also going to determine the level of participation that I'm going to have. One of the things, just as a reminder, my input originally on having something in May was that, you know, I'm not going to be in charge of creating the marketing plan or doing, you know, the outreach for all these things anyway. But as far as to be able to facilitate some of your conversations that are happening, I know that with my position right now and having so many staff vacancies, would not be able to provide you sufficient support for this to get off the ground in May. You will need to gather other resources. And one of the conversations that we had in the small group that I think is important to flesh out more is to make a list of what those resources are. So if you think of this as something that the community would put on for free, it needs to be scaled appropriately. And what I mean by is that it's going to be all volunteer effort. You're going to put on a summit and it's not going to cost anybody anything to get there. And you're going to try to find a free space and you're going to shoestring a marketing then it just needs to be scaled appropriately. And what I mean by that is, who are you trying to attract to this? Getting back to Joe's comment, right? So earlier we heard you talk about equity and about engaging some communities like the South Side community, right? So if you wanted members of the South Side community to come, if you wanted members of the Weekend community to come, folks that are near some of these areas, places in Oakley or what have you, what I know from a best practice in public participation is that you provide those people stipends, and you provide those people, if you're going to ask them to come to a multi-hour activity, you do make sure that there's refreshments and food and beverages that are there for them, so that they don't have to worry about those things in their day-to-day busy lives. So is this, you'll have to decide, is this the kind of event where we want to make sure that the people who are most impacted by this are at the table? And if so, how are we going to plan accordingly? So again, resources. You'll want to grab someone who has a background in marketing and create a marketing plan, even if it's just for, even though this is a small event, that's the professional way to do it. And that marketing plan will have as an outcome a list of different things that you might need. You guys are also, Anne mentioned this, you need to think about the space you want, and very likely it could cost money. How are you gonna manage all of that? So back to the very beginning, I think maybe a first step for you all, or maybe it's not even just much of a first step, but an important step for you all, is to talk with those elected officials who are on your commission, but are also acting as liaisons, and ask them to talk to their colleagues, their cohort, their elected colleagues, and find out what they're interested in this and how it aligns with current council and commission member priorities. That make sense? Okay.
Tim?
I think it did occur to me that it might be good to talk to Vic and see if the TDA can buy into that the river is a problem, and that's, it's, if they're marketing the river, that maybe they have to be ahead of the problem rather than the other way around. And obviously, if there's funding, that's always the golden goose, and, grab it, because it sounds, I agree with what Steph is saying. It's good to have sponsorship. I have my own feeling about whose names you put on there. Who do you want to align with as the sponsor, not just take anybody's money? So I think it's a big conversation, and getting it done right is important. I understand the May thing, because that's when the bad news is going to come out, and having led neighborhood groups, anytime there's a crime problem, you get people showing up. So bad news brings people out. But I don't know how long that story will run. So that's a question, whether how long people's interest in the problem will stay on it. But That's my 2 cents or 3 cents.
I have mentioned this to Vic, not this meeting that we're just now talking about, but the fact that we do need to have a conversation. And she knows about the economic impact and the impaired waters, because I've told her about that in conversations I've had over the last month or 6 weeks. So I think, you know, I wasn't even thinking about this meeting, but I said I would love to get developers, hoteliers, the electeds, you know, the environmental and community members together to have a conversation about the issue and what we can do about it. That was a recent thought I shared with her, but I haven't heard anything back. But at least she's thinking about it, Tim, or at least she's aware of it, let me say. And in fact, yesterday when we were I had to leave early because we had a board meeting at Riverlink last night. But at the beginning, when I saw Vic come in, I told her that I would be sending her the information about the impact study, and that it was a big number. So I appreciate and agree with you, Tim, about getting TDA involved. I think they have a big audience and certainly funding and interest. They should have interest anyway.
Does anyone have any other thoughts about how this kind of milestone in May can be used as a springboard or a stake in the ground point in case we don't have the ability to have the summit in May? What else could happen that could be connected to a later summit?
Would it be appropriate for the Riverfront Commission to draft a press release and submitting that to, you know, the media outlets that we are planning a summit in the fall?
Well, the other thing we could do is to have a presentation about the Central Asheville watershed that would actually let people know things that are being done to address some of these issues right in our area. And how we're only starting on one part of it in the project area off of Livingston Street, because that's what we have some funding for. But there are also parts that come from AB Tech, you know, down that part of Haith Branch. And I don't know, that's just an idea, because a lot of that material is already prepared. And if we can get Renee on board to lead a presentation, I don't know how we would present it to the public. I mean, I know it's already been done for the public, but this would be a timely cue for another thing that something is being done, and how it's only a start of what needs to be done. But anyway.
Any other suggestions or comments?
I have a comment. I don't know how much of a surprise this all is for anyone who's paying attention to the river. And so when I think about a summit and I think about public presentations, I like the idea of inviting the outfitters and like people from Riverlink and all that, like, but they already know all this and they already care. Like, how are we going to be creative about reaching out to the people who will care, or once they know more? I guess I just feel like the same kind of people show up and they already know this stuff, or they've decided they care, they don't care. But how are we reaching out to like other people that it impacts on a daily basis too? And that's I don't have an answer to that question. I'm just encouraging us to maybe think about that, because that is where we're going to actually move the needle, because the needle has already been moved as far as we can move it based on like who we know and like who already cares about the river or has like an economic interest in the river because they take people out on rafts. So just want to put that out there too.
Kate, I really appreciate that. And it makes me think that, again, this is a apparently a commission that goes from Woodfin to just outside of Black Mountain. And there are a lot of individuals that aren't necessarily outfitters, but might be, you know, impacted by this for better or worse. And, you know, the water that comes into Asheville, as I mentioned yesterday, and you all are aware of it, it's flowing from other places and it goes through us and then downstream to Marshall and Hot Springs and everybody else. You know, those cities, all of us getting that water moving through, which has bacteria from other sources, and then we add to it, you know, I feel like we need to start a partnership with people outside the city of Asheville and people who have other benefits and interests from the river. I mean, if you talk to just again, as I mentioned, the farming community, they get water for their animals and their vegetables and whatever else they're cultivating from the river in large part. And how do we engage them in a conversation that has meaning and benefit? That's a big challenge. And people who don't live here in Asheville, how do we engage them? Because whatever we're experiencing, they're going to experience given a few more years. So I think you're right about not talking to the same people. And I think among various groups, we have names and contacts and capacity to invite. And there's the challenge of how many people do you beat over the head and how many people do you invite in and encourage and have a conversation that's not in their mind threatening. And that's sort of a nuanced issue, I think. Steph probably knows how to do that. It's not one of my strengths.
I'm going to take this opportunity to say I'm going to drive out now and drive along the river to get back into Asheville to go to work. And I'll be looking at the river the whole way. And thank you for all what you're doing. See you later.
Hi, Tim. Samantha, you raised your hand.
I did. Thanks. I just want to reflect the earlier comment about ways that conversations like these can be convened intentionally to, I guess, include voices that are not necessarily well represented at the table currently. And I think that that's a really important point. And it also kind of begs the question about how to make sure that these sorts of convenings and conversations are not just happening at a place of access for a lot of people at one space at one time, but also whether we're going to be able to do a good job of meeting folks where they are anyway, and knowing that the Rivershed does definitely extend past just the River Arts District. Maybe there's some room to talk about facilitating these conversations on the ground in multiple places over time, to make sure that, you know, we're meeting folks in community and not asking everyone to show up at a space that's maybe familiar to this commission, but less so to folks on other parts of the Rivershed. So just a thought.
Thanks, Samantha.
This is going to sound like it has nothing to do with this, but how many of you have participated in Leadership Asheville at some point? Graduated from it? Darren did?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Okay, but you've participated with them or you've met them.
From the outside, yeah.
Okay, more on that later. Just curious. And I think this will come up when we just do an asset mapping exercise later on about who we know and who we can pull in as resources.
Let's see. So next on the agenda, we're really jumping around here in an effort to expedite the meeting and make sure everybody has time for the entire meeting. But let's see. I think we've gotten through the agenda here. Is there any other points that we need to discuss, Steph, before we adjourn? Or any other commissioners, if you'd like to bring any new business up?
I'd like to just say that I really enjoyed hearing Jay Hackett talk yesterday. I didn't hear him in the afternoon, but I heard him in the morning. And, you know, hearing him speak about, you know, how people from his community or the people of color are, you know, often off-put by certain approaches, or they're hesitant to participate. And I think if we want them to participate and would like their input, we need to really have, you know, a better understanding of how to do that and how to make that outreach and in a way that would attract them and not push them away from something that either they don't think is relevant or that they. In other words, we need to respect, you know, what they can bring to us and invite their input. And I don't know how to do that. Personally, I mean, we can try different things, but we need to talk with other people who know about this, and because it's a large community that's right, you know, on the banks of the river, you know, in several places, and it's. I think we'd all feel better if they were more included, and I mean, just little things like they didn't want to change the name of Nasty Branch. They wanted it to be Nasty Branch. It always had been Nasty Branch. So, you know, we need to know things so that we don't push them away further. We want to include them and know what their thoughts and their participation, what would participation look like to them. Anyway, that was one thing that I wanted to add.
Well, Joe, when Jay talked in the afternoon, he talked about collaboration and how important that was. And so that's exactly what you were just pointing out. And so I think that that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
I just want to second that. I think it is really important and a value that should really be central to a lot of these outreach conversations that we're having as a board. And I too really appreciated hearing those suggestions from Jay yesterday morning. And another nod to staff. I think it would be really great if in the future, as we're trying to have these conversations about how to plan something that really includes a lot of very critical neighbor and community feedback, that perhaps we figure out a way to loop neighborhood services and folks who are connected with neighbors and community members on the ground really closely, community centers, faith-based communities, et cetera, into this work so that we can be making sure we're offering the most kind of inclusive, accessible framework for these conversations as possible.
You know, well, I think those are great ideas. I know from my past experience and even experience here in town, what you're just all suggesting is like at least one order of magnitude more time consuming and challenging. We tried to have a resilience community input session right before and during COVID, and unfortunately it got impacted by COVID. But, you know, I know that you're just really talking about a totally different level of effort, and everybody in this group is going to have to be willing to really pull hard, push hard, dig hard, and spend a ton more time. And so the question from my perspective is what do we want as far as an outcome from this summit? If we're talking about people's thoughts and feelings about something or other, that's really great, but what does that get us? And how do we act? So I think everybody has to be, well, I'll just say I'm realistic and I'm a very concrete kind of person. And my whole last 5 or 6 years at EPA, we did a lot of community meetings around the region. They're very challenging and they take a lot of time. So just my 2 cents about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Anne. Thank you. I think that this larger conversation has to do with the summit, but also more generally about the commission itself and how we're communicating and our outreach and everything. So
Well, I would like to just add that the Wesley Grant Center has a amazing little auditorium with a stage, which could be a fantastic place to hold part of the summit. Or as I'm even sitting here, I'm thinking, if we go live with our commission meetings, since we don't really have well, I know there was talk about having it at the city, but maybe, Steph, there's a way to hold our commission meetings remotely around the city in places like the Wesley Grant Auditorium to make a real effort to bring the discussion to the area.
I love that idea.
Just a thought, because they do have a wonderful space, and in my opinion, it seems to be underutilized for holding real conversations. And I think that gesture could be the kind of thing we need to show as a group.
Well, there's also the Eddington Center and their outdoor pavilion, which I had a little hand in. For a smaller group, I mean, it couldn't take a huge group, but it's outdoors and it's right by their community garden, which is successful. And anyway, that's another place that we could utilize, and I think we'd be welcome. I know we'd be welcome there.
It sounds like this is a continuing conversation, and I am going to take all of your comments and go through ones that, maybe city staff can help address, and also through the provision of resources and some core services that we already provide, such as the neighborhood services that Samantha mentioned, and or through our equity office and some of our other professional capacities in the organization. Okay.
Well, are there any other discussion items that we need to go through, Steph, before we?
It sounds like we're.
Go ahead.
It sounds like we have a few things that we're going to push to the next agenda, as far as some team building exercises, and I think that there's no business that you all were voting on today, so that you can feel good in adjourning.
Well, let me just go ahead, Ann.
I just wanted to say, did we decide we're going to look at May for our summit and get working on that? Or do we get lost in conversation and we don't know when it is now?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Steph, but it doesn't sound like you're going to be available to support a May summit. So my thought is that we really need all the help we can get. And Steph is such an integral part of this commission that I would feel lost without her. So my opinion is that we should try to push it out. And I know it may not be ideal based on the reports, but maybe there's a way to tie the report to this summit and give us the time to do the work that we're going to need to do to market the event appropriately.
Well, I was just going to suggest that our smaller group that's been looking at these issues, meet sometime before our next commission meeting to kind of focus our, into what we can do. And I also wanted to mention that Stephanie has brought on some new helpers, some of whom we met yesterday. Carly, I think, maybe she could, if Steph doesn't personally have time, maybe she's got someone else on her team that could fill in some and would welcome a new challenge. Anyway, Darren, why don't you send out or why don't we make a time for a meeting so we can at least in our smaller group continue or focus our next effort.
I'll do that.
Your, just as a reminder, your next Riverfront Commission meeting is actually coming up pretty fast since we're doing this retreat or annual work session at the end of the month. Your next AARRC meeting is April 14th. So a meeting, if we wanted to have a meeting with the subcommittee, the working group, in advance of that, that would look like sometime in the next week or two, perhaps.
Yeah. I'm looking at March 31st, but I can send an email out. That's next
Okay.
Thursday, but I'll send an email.
And I would say that on that agenda, just what it sounds like to me, I'm not sure if this is correct, but what I'm hearing is there may be some kind of desire to have something in May or to rethink who you all are trying to reach and at what time you need to reach them. So I'm not really chiming in on the date as opposed to saying that, talking about it more specifically, what the goals are.
I just want to say, I can't make it on the 31st. We had a death in our family and I'll be away that day. So.
Okay. We'll look at other dates then. Well, thank you, everybody. Looks like we lost David. So it's 10:14 and I'd like to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.